So, welcome to this episode of the Mindset Game podcast. Today, I am thrilled and excited to have a very special guest with us. And her name is Ande Frazier. And Ande and I met at an executive meeting where I spoke and really connected because the topic of the meeting was about mindset. And mindset, specifically regarding finance, is Ande's specialty. So let me tell you a little bit about her. Ande is a widely known expert on behavioral finance. She regularly appears on top national media outlets to speak about topics at the intersection of women and finance. Ande's career accomplishments are many. They've led her to be named one of Bristol's Who's Who among distinguished professionals and executives, top 100 in finance for 2019, and top 50 women of 2019 by the Top 100 magazine. She is also an Amazon best-selling author of the book Financially Free, which is 11 conversations people need to have with yourself about life, money, and worth. And on a personal note, I purchased the book. I've read the book, and it is excellent, and I highly recommend it. So, Ande, it is just purely a joy and an honor to have you here today because it is an important conversation for people to hear. So, welcome.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
So I would love to just hear a little bit more about how you got to do what you do and kind of the path, if you will.
So I didn't really have aspirations of being in the financial business growing up. I wanted to be in the fashion business. So this is about as far as you can get from the fashion business. But my dad made a career change right before my freshman year of college. He was a Southern Baptist minister, and then he went into the financial business because he had authored a book on taxation for ministers and clergy. And so many people throughout his work as a minister were coming to him with relationship problems and family issues related to money that he felt like that he could pursue this passion and it could continue to be a ministry to so many people. And so he launched into the business during my freshman year of college. And as I was going through college, he kept encouraging me to consider this as a career for myself. And so I joined him in practice right out of college and have made my way through a lot of different roles within the financial industry and am now returning to work with him in private practice. And so it's been, a really great journey. And throughout that, I have just really focused a lot on the behavioral finance side, largely because of different experiences that I had as a child that I wanted to dive in deeper and understand and bring that information and education to the people that I worked with. And so that's kind of how I got started. And it's been an extremely rewarding career. And I love being able to meet people and help them in this area.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Would you be willing to share maybe one of those stories that, from your own life that has helped you to learn what you learn and help people in the way that you do?
So I think I can go back to one of the very first experiences I had when I was working right out of school as an advisor. And I met with this woman and I write about her in kind of a composition way in my book. But this woman came to my office and she was pretty much in despair around her financial situation. She was kind of swinging back and forth between being in debt and getting out of debt and, trying to achieve goals and then end up spending money recklessly. And she was just kind of at her wit's end about it. And so we sat down and started to talk. And one of the things that I recognized is that while I could help her set financial goals and talk with her about saving money and where to put it and all of that, that what we had to do first is we needed to really help her understand her relationship to money and why she was participating in this vicious cycle. Because if we didn't address that, it didn't matter what plans we put into place, she wouldn't stay consistent with them. And so it really just sparked my interest in understanding how human behavior and how our mindset dictates our ability to achieve what we want to financially and how it impacts all areas of our lives. And so that kind of started me on this journey of trying to understand our behavior around money. And since then, I've experienced many, many different people, both male and female, who've come, families, couples, children who've come into my office, who've asked these questions where we've been able to dive in deep to understanding that. And the more that we uncover it and unpack it, the more confidence that people have and the more clarity they have about why they are doing what they're doing. And now when we're setting goals and we're moving forward, they have a better chance of succeeding them because they know where the pitfalls are. They know where, they want to be. And it's a place that we can come together and have a real transparent, trust filled conversation about what's going on, and I can be an advocate for them and kind of hold them to account to do what they said that they wanted to do. And so it's a much more powerful relationship that way.
And what are some of the common mindsets that you often hear about money?
Well, the one that I had with this particular woman that we uncovered is, I am not worthy, or I'm inadequate. And I hear that so much, and it sometimes manifests in different ways. I think it goes back to this mindset of trying to look good, whether it be look good to your family or friends or work colleagues, or maybe it's to overcome something that happened in their childhood, a perception that they feel that people have about them. And so that kind of drives their mindset a lot, especially in regards to spending and saving. Another one might be that I'm never going to have enough. There's this kind of scarcity mindset, if you will. So people sometimes will swing to the other area where they'll hoard money. They won't spend it on the things that they want to do. And they're scared to do anything. And they're very frightful of what might happen. And that's not a great place either, because what I think is important is that people certainly save for the future, but also enjoy life today and have a balance between the two.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you. And it's interesting because I've heard those same kinds of mindsets in many areas of life. Of course, not just about money. And I know from your book, you shared some pretty startling statistics about women feeling overwhelmed about thinking about their finances, and 31% actually feel discouraged. And I mean, even though I knew that this was a problem, I was, kind of just stunned by those statistics, how serious this problem is.
And what I found when I was doing research for the book is that when I spoke to women, what they told me is they didn't really think about money until an inciting incident came about. And it could be a positive or a negative incident. It could be, the death of a loved one, or a sudden change in relationship, a divorce per se, or it might be something really positive like the upcoming birth of a child, or adoption of a child, or getting married, or launching a business. So it wasn't always bad. There were good things too. But when these events would come into their lives, they would have this, aha moment of, I need to do something around my money. I need to get a handle on this. And so they would try to learn what they needed to do. And the challenge with that is when you're learning, when you're in the middle of a whirlwind full of a lot of different decisions happening, coming at you at one time, it can be very hard and challenging to kind of discern what you need to be doing from what people are telling you, who's got your best interest at heart. And it can feel very overwhelming. And I think that unfortunately is where a lot of women find themselves. And so one of the things that I hope is that women will start to pay attention to this before an inciting incident occurs, so that they can be educated in a safe kind of in a safe way, where there's not things coming at them. They can take their time, they can ask questions, they're not feeling rushed or pressured to have to do something. And that gives them a lot more room to be able to explore this relationship with money, so that when an event does happen, they're prepared for it, and they have the ability to really take action in a positive way.
And I know that one of the things that you do as part of your process is to help people uncover their values. Can you tell us a little bit more about the connection between values and mindset?
It's so funny. A lot of people will focus on financial goals, right? And so they'll have goals to save for retirement, or to save for college for their kids, or to buy a house, or to launch a business, or whatever. And a lot of times when I sit down with people and I start hearing their goals, one of the things that I start to get a handle on is that sometimes these goals are not really their goals, but they're goals that somebody else has been given to them. They're things that they think they should be doing, right? And so what I tell people is, you have to stop shoulding all over yourself. You have to have goals that are really meaningful and purposeful to you. And the best way to do that is to go back and identify your values. What are those ride or die cornerstones that at the end of the day, you would sacrifice for, fight for, strive for? What are those things that are important to you? And when you define those values first, then goal setting becomes a lot easier. and a lot more meaningful. And then when you set goals, you anchor them to the values, and then you can start thinking about the actions you want to take part in to reach your goals. And so all of it gets tethered together, and it creates a more powerful, you know, pull towards the right direction for them. And so it's important to have all three really aligned.
And what happens if people have conflicting goals? Like maybe part of them wants to save for retirement and another part of them wants to be able to take a really nice vacation or something like that.
Well, I think there's ways to do both, but at the end of the day, I guess it's kind of looking at that value, right? So, when I think about people who want to take vacation, what's their value? Is it that they want to spend time with family? Or is it that they want to take a break and, enjoy some partying or, or relax? What is it really that their value is anchored to? Because sometimes that can really drive, being able to take a vacation, and maybe it looks differently depending on their value. And setting up for retirement, what is that value anchored to? Is it that they don't want to be a burden to their family? See, that there we have a family value that might be tied to both. And so how do we solve for both of those issues, knowing that the value is aligned? For me, one of my values was independence. And I find sometimes people, when they first do a values exercise, they will have similar values. And so I like to collapse them together into what pulls them the strongest. So security was a value of mine and independence, but at the end of the day, independence was more important to me than security, because I wanted to make sure that I didn't need anyone else to be able to be okay. And so that can really drive your goals there. And it's about understanding that value so that when you are thinking about planning for your goals, you can do so in a way to hopefully get both of those things, to have those great vacations and also to be able to save for retirement. It's about making intentional choices on how you want to spend your money.
Yeah, I agree with you in terms of intention. The power of intention is so important. And as you said, to understand the why, right? What are the values? What's important and meaningful behind what we want? Because like you said, many of us have goals that are not really our own. Mm-hmm. And meaning is really important. And so what happens if someone feels kind of stuck? Like maybe they want to launch a business or do something and they're kind of stuck because they're doubting their ability to make the money that they need to make to feel secure. Let's say if that's, at the top of their list, or to have more certainty. What advice do you have for those individuals?
Well, I think sometimes people think they have to do everything at one time. So when somebody says to me something like, I want to launch a business and I don't know, if it's going to be profitable, if I'm going to be able to survive, then what I really want them to do is think about the actions that they could be taking. An action might be something as research my business to see what, other competitive businesses are already formed around my area. Who is my target market? Or, what kind of money would I need to be able to live, okay for 6 months? Maybe it would be a little tight, but what would I need to have? And so picking actions that move them at least one step forward starts them on that journey where they don't feel like it's so overwhelming they have to do everything at once. And so those actions that we tether to that goal are really important. And it's sometimes really small little things that you can do to get started. And once you do that, then you can say, okay, I've done that. What's the next action? What's the next thing on the list? And before long, you've developed a really strong plan, and and you can look at it and say, this is going to work for me, or this isn't, or in order to achieve this, I'm going to have to make some changes in other areas of my life. But once you know the actions and you've done a little work, it starts to help formulate and co-create that plan.
Yeah, and the clarity is very powerful. I agree with you, to build momentum, even if momentum at first starts with the research, with getting clarity and seeing the truth, because I think a lot of people have stories about what they need in order to survive or to maintain a certain lifestyle. And sometimes, that's not actually true. And it really is a matter of priorities. And so I agree with you. And what about individuals that, let's say, are in transition? Maybe they're, in job transition, they don't have an income. What advice, if any, do you have for them that just live in constant fear? Am I going to be able to, pay my mortgage next month? What can help them?
I've been speaking a lot about this on a lot of the media lately with, all that we've been through this last year. And I think that the first thing is I know it can be really challenging to not feel discouraged, But the best thing that you can do is just be very accurate about where you are right now. Get clear about your current location. I talk to people and I will tell them, if we're driving somewhere and we're putting in our navigation or where we want to go, that's not enough. We have to know exactly where we are right now to get the directions. So you have to get really clear about where you are. And that means taking a really good look at the money that's coming into your world, the money that's going out, figuring out where adjustments might need to be made, even if temporarily, and keeping an open mind about options that might be available to you. I think it's unfortunately so easy to just give up and feel like there's nothing that's going to go your way, or I'm not going to make that phone call to find out if my landlord will waive my rent this month, or they don't reach out, they feel trapped. And I think being in communication about what you need, because the answer is definitely no if you don't ask. And so getting clear about where you are right now so that you can then take meaningful actions to figure out how do you get through the next 30 days. So often I see people when they're in this area of, I don't have any money coming in, I'm on unemployment, I'm not able to make ends meet, but they don't really have a handle on what their spending is and what money is coming in at all, or what other resources might be out there. And so getting really clear about where you are can help you to then start to develop a plan to move forward and be open-minded, I think the thing that really strikes me that's unfortunate is so many people have this feeling of shame when they've lost a job, and they feel like they've lost this kind of sense of purpose. And so that can sometimes really color how we choose to respond to these situations we find ourselves in. And so one of the things that I do in my work with people is to help them understand that this is an event that's happening, and it's to you. It is not you. Right. And when you can bifurcate that away from each other, then it allows them to have some more power about, this is who I am, and this is an event that's happening, and I can move forward knowing that I'm not collapsing the two.
Yeah, I really appreciate that you shared that, because it is a big problem. And when people feel that sense of shame, losing their identity, they're grieving. And when we're grieving, we're not thinking clearly. We're not able to kind of make those decisions of what to do next. And so I think that what you're sharing around giving ourselves permission to just take those little steps to start to get clear, where am I, right now, what's the truth of where I am, and where am I going, and what do I really need in order to get there, and just, taking one foot in front of the other. And, I'm curious, what are some of the empowering mindsets that people can start to practice to help them to get into that more empowered state?
Well, we talked about scarcity. I think, certainly the opposite of that is abundancy, and recognizing that there's plenty of money to go around, that there are opportunities, and just because somebody else has something doesn't mean you can't have it as well. And I think that really operating inside of, you can have anything that you want for yourself if you have the ability to really, own that and dream about it and do the work that's required. And so I think the abundancy mindset is a very empowering mindset. I operate under kind of a mindset of making sure that when I put something out to the universe, I'm surrendering it, and I'm not attached to how I get there. So many people get really attached to how to get there that they don't just let it go. And I think, you have to be in action. I'm not saying sit by and wait for the Mercedes to show up in your driveway. I'm saying be in action, but don't get so attached to how that happens. Be committed, but not attached to that. And so I think kind of surrendering it and being able to say, this is my, what I want, and then surrendering that, and then but be in action around the steps that you need to take. I personally create my future every year, and it's such a powerful exercise. And I think that people forget that they can do that, but it's not something that I, read over every morning. It's something that I do in the beginning of the, end of the year, usually in preparation for the next year. And maybe once a month, I'll kind of glance through it and see how I'm doing. But it's something that I say, this is what's going to happen. I'm surrendering it to the universe. And then I'm in action doing the things that I know to do, that will move me forward on fulfilling that. And so I think for many people, having a surrender mindset, being committed but not attached, abundancy, gratitude, I think that's another really empowering mindset, is being grateful for what you do have, and getting present to that, and being open to having, more things come into your life.
Yeah, each and every one of those mindsets are absolutely critical, not just in terms of our financial well-being and what we want to create in that area of our life, but in any area. Because when we're in a mindset of, let's say, appreciation for what we have, and then that is in essence a surrendering, because what we're saying is no matter what happens, I'm okay, right? Thank you. And that's a very, very powerful mindset, because we're not resisting what it is that we want. Yeah, we're kind of grateful for where we are. Of course, we're eager for more. That's why we do the exercises like you talked about, creating our year, setting our goals, making sure they're aligned with our values and so on. But at the same time, it's being okay with where we are, being in an abundant mindset exactly where we are. And so how about when someone has kind of that upward momentum? So things are going well, what do you advise for them in terms of kind of keeping that momentum up, that from a financial perspective? Because of course, stuff shows up, distractions show up. How do they maintain that?
Well, one of the things that I have to do is look at some of the biases that people are operating inside of. And unfortunately, one of the things that kind of comes along with having this upward momentum is there tends to be an overconfidence bias that occurs, where all of a sudden you feel like you can do anything and everything's always going to keep going up. And I think it's just about making sure there's reality checks along the way. And that doesn't mean like, bad things can happen. It just means being real and making sure you're not inflating and imagining and operating in magical thinking, that you're still grounding yourself in realism at the end of the day. And while also having, the possibility to fulfilling your dreams. And I think that goes back to whether they're in a positive mindset or maybe a not so positive mindset, is anchoring it back to those values and goals, coming back to that kind of allows them to kind of reground themselves. So, sometimes people who have this upward momentum think they can spend money all of a sudden because they have it coming in, especially some of the clients I'm working with recently have new money. It's happened very fast. It's sudden wealth, and it can be overwhelming, and they think that they are going to always have it. And yet the industry that they happen to be in is not one that has a long track record. It hasn't even been around that long. So, being able to have some realism in there and preparing for what happens if this goes away, and not getting overly confident with it, the fact that you've got all this money coming in today, will it continue? And so it's about balancing them and making sure that they're grounded some way there.
Yeah, excellent. And it is absolutely true to always kind of know what's the truth of where we are, and being mindful not to make assumptions about where things will be. And I'm curious, if we were to kind of shift the lens now to kind of the younger folks that are just starting their career, maybe even in college, and what do they need to know? If there were like just a few tips, simple things that they really need to know to kind of set themselves up for success in kind of the financial area of their life, what would you advise them?
Well, so I love talking to young people. I have a daughter that's in college now and a son that's a junior in high school. So I, am in these conversations with them constantly. And what I would tell a young person is that it's really important to get good habits established as early on as possible. And the good habit would be is making sure you're paying yourself first, going and putting money aside before you spend it. So a lot of times what people do is they pay their bills, and then if there's anything left over, they may save some or they may spend it. If there's any left over. And what I would tell them is set aside a certain amount before you figure out what your bills are. And then if you have to reorganize your expenses to live on what's left, then that's okay. That's worth the adjustment, but pay yourself first, because you are, the most important thing at that moment is to take care of yourself and setting money aside. So many young people are so strapped with debt, especially if they've gone to college and incurred student loans. And so I think some, young people just feel very overwhelmed by the prospect of having to spend $1,000 a month or so to, kind of pay off this debt. And so it's very hard for them to want to save, because they feel like, well, whatever I have left, if I have anything left after I pay my basic bills. I want to spend on myself a little bit. And so sometimes it's about just saving a little bit, even if it's $5 a week, just getting in the habit so that as they start to pay off that debt and they earn more, that they can start to save more for themselves. And then finally, when you do pay off debt, like if you've been doing it for a while and you finally get it paid off, that doesn't mean that that's money you get to spend,
Mhm.
right? Frivolously. It means, now that you've adjusted to live without that money, what might you do with that money that sets you on a path forward? And so looking at that so that before you get used to spending it, and you can treat yourself for something special if you want when you pay off debt, but it's about not getting in the habit of treating yourself every month that can be the challenge there.
Yeah, thank you. And the key word there is habit. And I believe that it is those habits, not just, of course, for the people just starting their career, but it really is the habits, the daily habits in terms of actions, like you said, the little actions for anyone, and in terms of habits of thought. And so when we look at it through the lens of habits of thought, what are some habits of thought that you recommend for people with regards to money? Mhm.
So going back to the young people, I think one of the things that happens with their thoughts is they think they have time. They think I'm not retiring for 40 something years. I have plenty of time to figure that out. Or I'm not married. I'm not even in a relationship. I don't need to be thinking about those things. But what we do know is that time is our friend when it comes to money. That we can save a smaller amount today, but if we have time, then, to build that, then that's great. Whereas if we wait, then we've got to save a lot more, which can be harder later on. And we might have to take unnecessary risks to get to where we really want to be. And so I think it's about making sure that they recognize that even though that goal of whatever it is they're striving for may be way out in the future, that, at least if they're making logical, reasonable steps today to get in those good habits, that they can know that they are doing what is best for their future self. And so sometimes I'll have them do an exercise where I'll say, if you were, 20 years from now, if you were looking back and writing a letter to yourself today, what would you say that you would want to have accomplished financially? And that sometimes can get them kind of out of this. That's later on. I have plenty of time to do that. As far as with other people, I think it's about just recognizing that, not everybody makes great decisions with their money. I mean, it's way more common than people who do make good decisions. And so recognizing that, whatever happened in the past, whatever just poor decision that you may think you've made, the best way to stop that from impacting your future is to just say that's in the past. And now my goal is to take one step to move forward. That's the way you really stop that from impacting your future, is to say, no longer am I going to let that define my future. I'm going to start today and move forward.
And that's such an important point. In fact, one of my clients who's got a financial goal of, saving a certain amount of money for his 3 kids to go to college, one of his limiting mindsets was, I've made, bad decisions, bad financial decisions. There's a lack of trust because of that. They don't really trust their intuition. They don't trust their ability to make those decisions moving forward. How can they truly kind of let go of that to be able to rebuild trust?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think that getting into action and having a small win is really important. So, if you read anything about debt, as an example, on the internet, or you hear people talk about debt, they'll always say, well, you should, pay the debt with the largest interest rate first and then work your way down. And, logically and economically and numbers wise, that makes all the sense in the world. But what I find is sometimes people need quick wins in order to keep motivated, in order to help them repair the trust that they have in themselves. And in that case, I might say pay the debt that's the smallest amount first so that you get it done, paid off, and you get to have that success, because that may be just enough for them to be able to know, okay, I can do this. I can move forward and do this. Or it might be setting a small savings goal and just sticking with it for 6 months. And then after that, you can say, see, I was able to do that. I was able to, do what I said I was going to do. I can trust myself a little bit more as a result of achieving that small time framed goal. And so I like to look for opportunities for quick wins for people so that they can start to slowly rebuild the trust that they have in themselves. And then from a perspective of a financial professional, someone who's giving people advice, I think that, being just really clear and transparent with people at all times is what also starts to build trust, that they know that I've got their best interest at heart. So, ask me anything, I'm going to give you a straight answer. And because I'm here to really allow you to be able to see what is in front of you and how to make powerful decisions. And I wish more advisors were, not afraid to just be straight with people, because I think when people get that communication given to them straight, they're more empowered to be able to know and trust that they are moving forward in a positive way.
Yes, I agree with that. And I also agree about the small wins. And we also see that from research around building momentum, starting to build that trust, because it really all goes back to mindset, as you and I both know, and just trusting ourselves more and more. And then, of course, being able to kind of take bigger risks or take bigger action steps.
And acknowledging when you've actually had a win, like acknowledge yourself. I did that. I was able to do that, and so maybe that's having an accountability partner that can also help to acknowledge you for that accomplishment, sharing that small goal with one person that you trust, and then they can celebrate with you and be able to acknowledge you. I think that goes a long way too towards feeling more confident around what you're doing and why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even just the concept of, I appreciate that you brought it up, accountability,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of, financial goals and so on. I think accountability is really important. And again, we know that people who have those structures, those accountability structures set up, and when they're being utilized, that, everybody gets much better results, because sometimes we forget and we are distracted, or we get back in our old stories. So that certainly helps, whether it's from an advisor such as yourself, a coach, somebody that can, or a friend, a trusted colleague, someone that can help them to stay on course and celebrate.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big believer in personal responsibility. And you are responsible for where you are and how you got there, but you're also responsible for how you move forward and what you do now with the information that you have. And so I think personal responsibility is a big one, and having accountability around that with somebody else sometimes is the motivation that someone needs. Other people may be more self-motivated and think it's finding out what motivates you and what will drive you, and then tapping into that and using it in terms of helping you achieve what you want to financially.
Yeah. Thank you, Andy. And as we kind of, complete our conversation, I'd love to know, how can people learn more? There's so much wealth of knowledge that you've shared with us today. I mean, I have to tell you, if someone just heard this conversation, they would be in a much better place in terms of getting their mindset right, and of course, taking some actions towards that, being financially free. How can they learn more?
Well, I'll just give a selfish plug here. I mean, certainly buy my book. It's on Amazon or any major bookseller. You can go to my website, andefrazier.com. I do write frequently blogs and newsletters, and that you can subscribe. It's free, just to at least keep this in the forefront of your mind, so that you constantly have a reminder about some of the things that you've been thinking about. And I would just encourage people to, you can follow me on social, but read what you can. But remember that when you read something, that a lot of people do have an agenda. So you want to read, but read from a perspective of, okay, I'm going to take this information, and it may be that I take bits and pieces. It may be that I take all of it. But, and sometimes when we write, as a writer myself, you have to write to a large group of people. And when it comes to your money, your individual situation might be different than your neighbors or your friend or your family member. And so when you're getting advice, just because they got a piece of advice doesn't mean it's right for you. It's really, really important that you be able to recognize you have a very individual situation that you have to kind of gather information about, but recognize that still at the end of the day that your situation may be different from others. And so I would encourage people to not only follow me, but there's so much else out there online, and just be in action around it, whether it's reading a book, listening to a podcast, watching something on TV, or, talking to a financial professional such as myself. Be in action, because not taking action is taking action. So that's really, I guess, what I would tell them.
Wonderful. And any kind of last words that you wish to share for our listeners today?
I didn't really talk a little bit about kind of what happened to me as a child and kind of something that really defined my relationship to money. And I'll save that for next time. But
I'd love to hear it. If you have a couple minutes, I mean, please.
So one of the things, I joined the financial industry right out of college, but when I got into the industry and I started kind of diving into this for myself, I really realized that I had a couple of really defining moments as a child that had kind of stuck with me. And I think they really impacted my desire to want to provide guidance for people in this area. One of the incidences was when we moved. I was in the sixth grade and my family moved into a different town. And I, started a new school as the new girl, and the other kids in the school already had their friend groups formed, and I was coming in, and sometimes that's a good thing, but in my case, it wasn't a good thing. And I just remember that a lot of the girls and even some of the boys, they made a decision about whether I was worthy enough to be their friend based on how much money my family had, what kind of clothes I wore, what kind of book bag I took. And I was, I was kind of bullied throughout middle school. I mean, so much so that I begged my mother to homeschool me. And a lot of that did come from their assumption about what wealth meant and the value of me as a person based on family wealth that I had really nothing to do with at that point in time. And so it really kind of stuck with me. And so what can manifest as a result of an experience like that is that you can have kind of this humiliation or shame that comes over you where you think, I'm bad or I'm not good enough or something's wrong with me because I don't have money. And I think that, unfortunately, and we're in a society where, it's no longer keeping up with the Joneses, it's keeping up with the Kardashians. I mean, there's materialism everywhere and meism everywhere. And I think just recognizing that, we have to take away this financial shame, and that just because things happen to us as it relates to money, money flows in and out of our lives. It's not who we are. We can be rich and we can be poor, and that has nothing to do with money. It has to do with our character and our values and our worthiness. And when you really own that, then you can make more powerful decisions around your money. And so I guess my last word would be, don't let being stuck in shame keep you from moving forward, because when you start to recognize that they're two different things, then you can really define who you are, and everybody is worthy, everyone is adequate, and everyone deserves to have financial success that allows them to be the best possible version of themselves.
Thank you. And I have to tell you, on a personal note, what you've just shared is very meaningful to me. And I did not even realize until you shared your story that I too carried some shame, because when we moved to Denver from Israel when I was 10, my family didn't work. My dad was a full-time student. We didn't have money. We moved because I was sick. I had asthma as a child, and it was more for medical reasons. And we didn't have an income for 3 years. And I remember, and I went to a private school. My dad volunteered for me to be able to go there because we didn't have money for tuition. And everybody around me was, had wealth. They wore the Guess jeans and they did all these things. And my parents went to Kmart, blue light special to buy, whatever we could buy. And there was a great deal of shame around that, not being good enough, needing to kind of fit in. And so I truly appreciate what you shared, because I think many people have had similar experiences to that, regardless of where they were and where their family was, of wanting to belong and being judged by that. And some people, of course, still have that as an adult, kind of that need, of course, as you said, to maintain a certain perception. And that is correlated with their self-worth. So thank you for bringing that to the forefront. It is such a core part of this work that you and I do, is to bring that to light. And because many of us are unconscious about that and what those kinds of experiences have had on our mindset. So bringing that to light and being okay with what's happened, and allowing that to empower us
Right
now. So thank you once again. And would you be willing to share your website once again with our listeners?
Yeah, so it's andefrazier.com, and you spell that ANDEFRAZIER.com.
Wonderful. Well, Andi, I'm personally just so grateful to you for sharing what you've shared today. Without a doubt, you've empowered people to really be mindful and take some good positive actions to be financially free and I believe emotionally free. So thank you.
Oh, well, thank you for allowing me to be able to talk about this topic. It's very meaningful to my soul, really, to be able to share this and to have this be a conversation that we're all taking part in, because I think it's through this conversation that we can really achieve momentum and movement forward with it.
Absolutely.